Joe Biden criticizes the Georgia election law. 3 months later, the Department of Justice challenges it. September 1st, Joe Biden criticizes the new pro-life law in Texas. 8 days later, the Department of Justice challenges it. September 29th, the political organization asked President Biden to involve the FBI in local school board issues. 5 days later, the Department of Justice does just that. Mr. Attorney General, was it just a coincidence that your memo came 5 days after the National School Boards Association letter went to the president?
So we are concerned about violence and threats of violence across the board against school officials, against...
Is there any connection, Mr. Attorney General, with the school board letter and then 5 days later your memo to regarding school board issues?
Obviously, the letter, which was public and asked for assistance from the Justice Department, was brought to our attention, and it's a relevant factor in...
Who gave you the letter?
I'm sorry?
How'd you become aware of the letter? Who gave it to you?
I read about the letter in the news. That's how I read about it.
What the White House told you to write the memo?
No one in the White House spoke to me about the memo at all, but I am sure, at least I certainly would believe that the White House communicated its concerns about the letter to the Justice Department, and that is perfectly...
Oh, that was my next question. Did you or anyone at the Justice Department discuss the memo with White House personnel or with anyone at the White House before the memo was sent?
I did not. I don't know whether anyone discussed the memo. I am sure that the communication from the National Association of School Boards was discussed between the White House and the Justice Department, and that's perfectly appropriate, just as...
Who were those individuals? Who at the White House talked with? Who at the Justice Department?
I don't know. I don't know.
Did they talk to you? Did someone call you?
I think I've answered. No one from the White House spoke to me. But the White House is perfectly appropriately concerned about violence, just like they're concerned about violence in the streets, and they make requests of the Justice Department in that respect, just like they're concerned
Did you or anyone at the Department of Justice communicate with the American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association, the National School Boards Association prior to your memo?
I did not. I don't know.
You don't know if anyone else at the Justice Department did?
I don't know.
You know, did you or anyone at the Justice Department communicate with those organizations, AFT, NEA, National School Boards Association, prior to the letter? Did you help the National School Boards Association put together the letter?
Again, not. I have had no such conversations. I would be surprised if that happened, but I don't know.
Will FBI agents be attending local school board meetings?
No, FBI agents will not be attending local school boards meetings, and there's nothing in this memo to suggest that. I want to, again, try to be clear. This memo is about violence and threats of violence.
Let me just point out, the same day you did the memo, the Justice Department sent out a press release, Monday, October 4th, 2021. The press release says, Justice Department addresses violent threats against school officials and teachers. Now, you said earlier to a question from one of my colleagues on the Republican sides that parents aren't domestic terrorists, we're not going to treat them that way. But let me just read from the third paragraph. According to the Attorney General's memorandum, the Justice Department will launch a series of additional efforts in the coming days designed to address the rising criminal conduct directed towards school personnel. Those efforts are expected to include a creation of a task force consisting of representatives from the Department's Criminal Division, Civil Rights Division, Executive Office of U.S. Attorneys, the FBI, the Community Relations Service, Office of Justice Programs, and the National Security Division. Now, I find that interesting. You said there's no way you're going to be treating parents as domestic terrorists, but you got the National Security Division in a press release regarding your memo that day.
My memo does not mention the National Security Division. It's addressed to...
I didn't say it did. I said the press release accompanying your memo that day from the Department of Justice, right here it is,
I'm going to be as clear
talks about the National Security Division being part of this effort.
I want to be clear as I can be. This is not about what happens inside school board meetings. It's only about threats of violence and violence aimed at school officials, school employees, and teachers.
First sentence of your memo, very first sentence, you said, in recent months there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence.
Yes.
When did you first review the data showing this so-called disturbing uptick?
So I read the letter, and we have been seeing over time threats.
Whoa. I didn't ask you. So you read the letter. That's your source?
So let me be clear. This is not a prosecution or an investigation.
Is there some study, some effort, some investigation someone did that said there's been a disturbing uptick, or you just take the words of the National School Board Association?
When the National School Board Association, which represents thousands of school boards and school board members, says that there are these kind of threats, when we read in the newspapers reports of threats of violence, when that is in the context of threats of violence
The
against
source
all-
for this, for the very first line in your memo.
Time of the gentleman has
disturbing spike
expired.
Was the School
The
Boards
time of the gentleman has
Association
been
letter.
expired, Mr. Deutsch.
Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired,
I yield back.
and the gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Stubbe from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Attorney General Garland, in your Senate confirmation hearing, you referred to the January 6th protests as the, and I quote, most dangerous threat to democracy in your law enforcement and judicial career. In that same hearing, you even compared January 6th to the Oklahoma City bombing case you worked on, where 168 people were killed. In June 15th, a speech announcing a new enhanced domestic terrorism policy, you cited January 6th as a motivation for that new policy. You went on to describe January 6th, and I quote, as an assault on a mainstay of our democratic system. You have said that prosecuting extremist attacks on our democratic institution remains central to the mission of the Department of Justice. So suffice it to say, it's clear that you feel very strongly about using the full force of your position to prosecute those involved in the January 6th protests. What is not clear, however, is if you will use the same force against violent left-wing domestic terrorists. Just last week, on October 14th, a group of extremist environmental and indigenous protesters forced their way into the Department of Interior. They fought with and injured security and police officers, sending some of those officers to the hospital. The extremists violently pushed their way into a restricted government building in an attempt to thwart the work of the Department of Interior. Police arrested at least 55 protesters on site, but others got away. Mr. Garland, do you believe that these environmental extremists who forced their way into the Department of Interior are also domestic terrorists?
I'm not going to be able to reference that specific incident since this is the first I know about it, but I will say that the department does not care.
So this is the first that you know about an incident where protesters forced themselves into a federal government building right here in D.C. Like you didn't hear about this at all.
This particular example, it doesn't mean the Justice Department doesn't know about it, but I personally haven't heard about it before, what you're saying right now. But I want to be clear, we don't care whether the violence comes from the left or from the right or from the middle or from up or from down. We will prosecute violations of the law according to the statutes and facts that we have. This is a nonpartisan determination of how to do that.
All right, I'll make it a little clearer for you. And most of us are lawyers here, so we use evidence in court. So you got two pictures here. One picture is from January 6th of individuals forcing themselves into the Capitol. This other picture is extremists forcing themselves into the Interior Department. So looking at these pictures, and I know you say you're not aware of this, which blows my mind that you're not aware of violent extremists forcing their way into a department right here in Washington, D.C., into a federal building. But just with these evidence, with these two pictures that you see here of people forcing themselves into a federal building, would you call both of these acts domestic terrorism?
Look, I'm not going to comment about particular matters. This is a matter that...
I'm not asking you to
well,
comment on a particular... I'm asking you to comment on these two photos. You have two pictures of individuals forcing themselves into a government building right here in Washington, D.C., and one, you as I laid out, very welcomely call them domestic terrorists, but you're refusing to call groups like this, who commit the same atrocities here in Washington, D.C., domestic terrorists.
One I know the facts of, the other I don't know the facts of.
Well, I'm showing you pictures. Here's facts right here. If you want, we'll act like we're in a courtroom. Exhibit A, Exhibit B. January 6th, Department of Interior.
Well, as you know,
based on these pictures of people forcing themselves into the...
One picture is not going to be I'm not going to be able to resolve a legal determination based on one picture. In the January 6th case, we have terabytes of video which disclose exactly what happened.
Speaker Pelosi, mindly, still hasn't released to the American public to view all that video that has been captured here in Washington and in the Capitol complex. But that's the problem that everyday Americans are facing right now, is they see these type of comments that you've made about January 6th, yet you're completely, and you're not answering my question now, and you're saying, well, that's an ongoing investigation and I don't know about it. But clearly, based on the pictures, clearly what has occurred, factually what's been widely reported in all sorts of different American outlets, that these individuals forced themselves into a building here in the Department of Interior, and you're refusing right here today before the American people to say, yes, that's the same type of activity that I'm going to bring the full force of the Department of Justice to come against, regardless of the ideology which you have said in the past, but you're refusing to do that today. And that's the problem with the challenges that this administration, your department is facing is everyday Americans who are seeing this on TV, and now you have the opportunity to set the record straight and say both of those actions, regardless of ideology, are against federal law and will be prosecuted with the full faith and credit of the Department of Justice, and you're refusing to do that. And that's the challenge that everyday Americans are having right now, is because they're seeing what you guys are doing to the people on January 6th, to the point where even a judge is saying that the speaker before me had 30 extra seconds. I asked the same deference that you gave to the previous speaker. That you have even judges who recently even held the Department of Corrections in contempt related to the way that the January 6 suspects have been treated, and you're refusing to even comment on the very acts that have just occurred here. And that's what is horribly wrong, and it is happening in our country, that the American
नासा में होके उदासा बिगड़ले, सूते न दिले हमके रात भर जगवले, सूते न दिले हमके रात भर जगवले। नासा में होके उदासा बिगड़ले, सूते न दिले हमके रात भर जगवले। चलल नहीं जाता तू दवैया ला दे ननदो, चलल नहीं जाता तू दवैया ला दे ननदो। छापना हरदिया मोर कमरिया टूटे ननदो, छापना हरदिया मोर कमरिया टूटे ननदो, कमरिया टूटे ननदो। रोज रोज लहंगा हमार नासी देता सेज हो, पी के जब आवे ननदो खोजे नाना भेज हो, खोजे नाना भेज हो। रोज रोज लहंगा हमार नासी देता सेज हो, पी के जब आवे ननदो खोजे नाना भेज हो। नया नया रोज पोज महारातावे ननदो, नया नया रोज पोज महारातावे ननदो। छापना हरदिया मोर कमरिया टूटे ननदो, छापना हरदिया मोर कमरिया टूटे ननदो। बिगड़ल अदातिया देले जगाही रोही अधिया धीरतिया, अधिया धीरतिया। सोल्जर सहिया के बिगड़ल अदातिया देले जगाही रोही अधिया धीरतिया। बर कब खीस कब हंसी छूटे ननदो, बर कब खीस कब हंसी छूटे ननदो। छापना हरदिया मोर कमरिया टूटे ननदो, छापना हरदिया मोर कमरिया।